So you started talking about the Senate a minute ago. The Democrats still control the Senate. The Judiciary Committee in the Senate, Pat Leahy of Vermont is the chairman, and Pat Leahy's talking about now aggressively beginning hearings and beginning a process of trying to fix it this summer. We also had this week, here's a quote from, this is sort of what he'd be up against in the Senate. This is Jeff Sessions, Republican from Alabama, responding to the ruling. He said, I'm just not aware of any discrimination of that kind. And if it happens, I have no doubt that the Alabama Attorney General would prosecute it, or the U.S. Department of Justice will. You don't need a Voting Rights Act if there's not systemic violations. So, that's a prevalent attitude, I think, among a lot of conservative, a lot of Republicans, a lot of Southerners, probably in the Senate and in the House. So, Senator Cowan, I just wonder what the noise you're hearing, on the Senate side is in terms of how Chairman Leahy would be approaching this summer.
Well, I think the Democrats led by Senator Leahy and Senator Reid are really going to push on this. I think Chris Coons from Delaware is also going to be pushing hard for some hearings. We're not going to sit idly by and let this happen. Listen, I would call on my Republican colleagues in the Senate to show that spirit of bipartisanship and really join with us in trying to address this phenomenon, because it's still very much a problem. With respect to Senator Sessions, or we say my friend from Alabama, I think one only needs to look at the congressional record from 2006, or if you don't have that much time, read Justice Ginsburg's dissent, and you'll see that we are still plagued by some significant problems when it comes to voting rights and access. And whether we're talking about Alabama or South Carolina or my birth state or North Carolina, wherever there is discrimination or efforts to limit the ability of anyone, particularly those who have been sort of on the margins and been, over the course of this history, been denied the right, we have to stand up, and that's what Congress has to do. I gave my farewell speech on the floor this week, and I said, quoting my predecessor, John Kerry, who I believe was paraphrasing Ronald Reagan, there's nothing that's wrong with the Senate or Congress that can't be fixed by what's right with the Congress. We've been sent there to move this nation forward, and any time there's any effort anywhere to restrict anyone's right to vote, we have to do something about that. Now, we have that obligation, but we've been sent there by the people. And I think the people need to rise up and make sure Congress hears them on this issue.
Well, what would you say, though? So if Senator Cowan or another member of the Senate came to you and said, we want to patch up, Section 4 in a way that's going to fit with, it's going to win approval from the Supreme Court, what would you say the guidelines should be for fixing it?
Well, certainly I would say that we need to look at the modern day voter suppression, and we need to look at things like the proposed photo ID laws that are being passed throughout the country, the rollback of early voting. And we need to look at those, and where we find that there is discrimination, then we need to basically challenge those under whatever we have at this point. But certainly I think that Congress really needs to look at the modern day record. We have a ton from 2006, but we have a lot from 2011 and 2012 where we show that the voter suppression in this country, which we believe was really had to do a lot with the fact that President Obama was elected. And certainly we look at 2008 and 2012, we had laws, attempts to roll back voter suppression against voters that we've never seen in this country in modern days. And so we don't need to go back to 2006. We only need to look back 2 years and really bring that record forward.
I was just going to say, Senator Sessions doesn't need to look any further than his home state to find that evidence of discrimination, because Shelby County, Alabama, which brought this challenge to the Supreme Court, was guilty of a Section 5 violation as recently as 2008. So this is very much
can you explain for me what was going on in Shelby County?
There was a city of Calera in Shelby County. They passed a redistricting plan that eliminated the only black city council district. It took it from 71% African American to 29% African American. He lost that election by a few votes under a map that was not pre-cleared by the Justice Department. The Justice Department stepped in, said, you need to change this law. You need to get approval for your voting change. They changed the way that districts were allocated. That man, Ernest Montgomery, subsequently was reelected in a new district. So now there is a black city council member. And this is the kind of stuff we're going to see happen without Section 5. It's not just going to be on a statewide level. There's going to be all these very important local races that get no national coverage. And this is where the biggest impact is going to have. These are where the gains under the Voting Rights Act are the most fragile and can be taken away most quickly without anyone knowing. And there's an irony, of course, of Alabama, the state that's the birthplace of the Voting Rights Act, being the one that's taking it away.
Well, you raised sort of an interesting point there, because one of the features of the Voting Rights Act and one of the features of preclearance is if you're changing the map, if you're changing like the congressional redistricting, a state that's under preclearance would have to run this by the Justice Department. And I found that the Republican Party, when it comes to Congress, has actually liked the Voting Rights Act in that it calls for majority-minority districts. And what Republican map makers in a lot of southern states have been able to do and elsewhere is pack minority voters into small districts, and then the population outside of those districts is a lot more Republican friendly. But I think what Ari is saying is look beyond the congressional map, look at city councils, look at the county level, look at the state legislature, and that is where Republicans can make serious gains under this. Yeah, and as Ari was saying, this is the stuff that doesn't get as much media attention, so it's not going to be covered nationally. You're not going to have as much of an outcry from Congress and these statewide voter ID laws that are getting passed. But this is how Republicans for so many years have been so much better than Democrats at getting people in on the ground level and these city councils, these school boards, and then gradually having them rise up to Congress, to Senate, and so forth. The evangelical movement, for example, was really good at this. So I think that the Voting Rights Act, dismantling it, could certainly do this on the local level, and it could be bad again because it's not going to get attention.
That's absolutely right. I was in 2011. I worked in Hondo, Texas, which is a majority Latino community now. And the districts were drawn, the commissioner districts were drawn to actually reverse the district that had the majority control for the Hispanic community. Interestingly, the community did sue on that issue and actually came back with a map that was not only gave them one district, but gave them two, because really they were the majority. And to see what is happening on the local level and how really there are so many opportunities for people to tweak maps that appear to be fair but aren't fair. They were drawn with the intent to discriminate that group. And so starting at the local level and really making sure that we are aware of the record, not only nationally, but what's happening on the ground. What are the communities saying? They are the people that know what's going on in their communities, and we need to listen because they know when actually discrimination is happening.
And let me say, this is a clarion call for the communities of color and others impacted by this decision to be even more involved at a grassroots level in our governance process. This is a clarion call. We're talking about the city council level, the state level, the federal level. We must get more involved in the game and make sure our representatives are speaking for us. And I'd also say to those leaders of those states who rushed out to impose laws that they otherwise wouldn't have been able to but for this ruling, if in fact you are changing voting laws not to discriminate but for some other so-called legitimate purpose, then notwithstanding this ruling, submit your plan to the Department of Justice anyway. Put it to the test. And if you don't, I ask the question, why not? And I suspect we all know the answer.
Well, I want to pick up that point in a minute, too, and talk a little bit about what the South in particular, and what these coverage states could look like. Again, we're talking about the possibility of a fix, but if there isn't a fix, I want to talk about what the future looks like for the next 10, 20 years in these states after this.